Welcome back to our podcast, friends. We are still on the Gita, Memoirs of a Psychiatrist, and we are on chapter 4, verse 14 through verse 18. I hope I can do it today, and I hope you all are staying safe at home and following all the guidelines. Lou, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. I am following all the guidelines, except I'm out working, but still, I'm doing all the protocols. Staying safe.
We're staying safe, doing everything remotely. Lou's in the studio. I'm not working remotely like all the TV stations and so on. So I hope you all are safe and using this time to better yourself and study and read and follow the scriptures and follow your purpose in life, which is to get to be one with the Atman within you. So with that, let's start verse 14, chapter 4. Verse 14 says, actions do not taint me, nor have I a desire for the fruit of the action. He who knows me thus is not bound by actions. So what Krishna is talking about here in verse 14, you remember last time we talked in our episode, was that 46, Lou?
Yes.
46, yes. In verse 46, we talked of the fact that I gave an analogy that was given to us by Gautam Jain and Swami Parthasarathi of the sun, that the sun is not tainted by the actions of all of us here. Without the sun, we cannot live. Mm-hmm. We have to have the sun, but as the sun has no relationship to how I act, but without the sun I cannot act. Then the sun is not tainted by my actions. Similarly, the Atman only gives us the life. Mm-hmm. And because of our actions, our actions do not taint the Atman.
Right.
I gave the example last time of a car and having gas or petrol in it, and the driver driving it fast, reckless, safe, getting into an accident, that whatever the driver does, the gas or the petrol is not affected.
Right.
The computer is not affected by the electricity is not affected by what the computer does on it. But without the electricity, the computer cannot work.
Right.
So the sun is not tainted by our actions. Another example that Gautam Jain gives is that of an actor on the stage. The actor has a person doing the acting, and let's say it's Tom Cruise,
right,
and he's on stage. He knows he has to act like he's grief-stricken. He is ready to commit suicide. He's very sad, and he looks it on the stage as the actor.
Yes.
Inside, Tom Cruise is saying, wow, the audience really likes my acting today. I must be doing a good job. Yes. He's happy.
Yes.
But on his face, he looks sad, and he looks like he's going to commit suicide. So what Krishna is saying in this verse is that I act, but I am not tainted by the actions. I'm not affected by the actions. I don't even care, as the Atman, I don't even care what the fruit of this action is. I don't care whether the audience likes me or not. I'm just here for making you do the action.
Right.
So he who knows me is not bound by the actions. The Atman is a pure witness, known in Sanskrit as a sakshi, and he's not attached to the results of the action. Therefore, those actions do not bind the Atman, whereas the rest of us do get bound. Now, verse 15 basically says, in the past, many sages have done this, and they've followed this to get to the self. And verse 15 says, in the past, seekers who have sought liberation from all bondage, we are bound to our body, mind, and our intellect. And those in the past that had a thirst to be free followed this. So this is Krishna's way of using emotion and trying to get a person, if you don't understand it intellectually, at least do it because your elders, the sages, the masters of the past did it. So verse 16 says, even the wise are deluded here as to what is action and what is inaction. Therefore I shall teach you action, knowing which you will be liberated from evil. So Krishna says, even somebody who's really wise, meaning or getting close to self-realization, is confused as to what is action and what is inaction, not doing any action. Therefore, I will teach you what is action, and once you know that, you'll be able to get on your path towards self-realization.
Right.
So he asks in this verse, kin karma, meaning what is karma? Kin akarma, what is inaction or non-action? So he says that these are all desire-ridden actions. So desire-ridden actions versus no inaction. And it's a little hard to understand, but once you understand, it becomes crystal clear.
Yeah.
Understand that this will go on for the next few verses. So it's important that we clarify it over here. You remember that we talked about how when you have a vasana inside you, something that you say, I want to do, right? Think of any vasanas. Think of a desire. That vasana brings up, like a well, a spring to have a thought, to say, wow, look at that. I could do this. I want to have a cup of coffee.
Right.
That thought then leads to a desire for a cup of coffee. That desire then leads to action. You get up and you start to go and you start to make a cup of coffee. That action, that then leads to either fulfillment of that action or non-fulfillment.
Right.
Either way, if it's fulfilled or not fulfilled, you are worsening and increasing your desires. So let's say you wanted that cup of coffee and you didn't get it.
Right.
The desire says, I didn't get that cup of coffee. Whole day you're going to be thinking about that cup of coffee. At night it's in your system. You have now increased your desire for that vasana.
Right.
That filters down through you and into what is known as the prakriti. Remember we talked about life after life when you keep being born. Those previous vasanas, those previous desires, those previous actions are settling down in yourself as prakriti. That becomes your inert nature with which you're born. And that produces the vasanas, that produces the thoughts, that produces the desires, which produce the actions, which go back into your prakriti. So it's a vicious cycle.
Right.
So that's what happens when a desire is not fulfilled. You have a desire for making a lot of money. So you invest your time, effort, you sacrifice, you work hard, but your business fails, suppose.
Yep.
Your desire is not fulfilled. So you keep thinking, what mistakes did I make? Your desire is not fulfilled. You're actually having more desires for that. Those desires get filtered down for more money, more money, more money.
Right.
Assuming that your desires are fulfilled, the minute your desires are fulfilled, it leads to other desires.
Right.
I don't even need to give you examples. You can just imagine yourself what happens when your desires are fulfilled. You get more desires. So it's a vicious cycle. You get more desires, you get more action, and then it goes into your prakriti. So how to get rid of desire? How do you get rid of it? You can't just say, stop thinking about it. You're going to get rid of it. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So again, the example that Gautam Jain gave us was that of a child growing up to be a man. He says, when you're a child, you love certain things. Comic books, for instance. I remember when I was growing up, I loved comic books. I had boxes and boxes of collections of comic books in India where I was growing up. And I used to think that this is the most valuable possession I had. I was never going to get rid of them. As one gets older, you get rid of those desires for those things, the toys, the marbles, the comic books, whatever. And you develop new desires. You say, forget, comic books are great, but my new bicycle, oh my God,
right.
I love my bicycle. I remember when I first got my first bicycle, I was so thrilled. I used to ride it all over. Comics books sort of took a second place at that time. Then as I grew older, as we all get older, other desires come up and you start to look at them and the lower ones fall off. Now, I don't think about my bicycles. I don't think about my comic books, but I might think of other things.
Right.
You might think of a car. You might think of a house. You think of your spouse. You think of your children. You think of your family. So what the proof is that as your desires go into different places, higher places, the lower ones drop off. it is proof, as you think about it, that your childish desires fall by the wayside as you develop other desires. Keep that in mind. And what he is saying very clearly here is that when you start to love and care for the higher powers, the Ishvara, the God, your lower desires will fall off. Two things happen at that point. Number one, that happens is as you start thinking of a higher, whatever work you do for the higher cause, right? Whatever work you do, as the Gita verses say, dedicate your service to Ishwar. Dedicate your service to the Lord. Think of the higher, and the lower desires just fall off automatically. You can't get rid of them. You can't say, well, I can't think of this. It just automatically drops off. So, and the other thing is, don't feed your desires. So, very important that just thinking about higher desire alone is not enough. Your mind will keep throwing these thoughts into your conscious, and you say, oh, suddenly you think, what about that cup of coffee? Or what about that extra few dollars I was going to... Just have to be able to push your five senses and your mind away from that. If it's something that the eyes would be looking at that would tempt you, make sure that your eyes turn away from it. Something that your ears would be listening to, turn it off. These, in today's day and age, TV, magazines, photographs, graphics, all just tend to bombard you with these lures of the world. You have to be able to direct your mind, your ears, your senses, and your mind away from that so that the desires are less. So, verse 17 is, verily action should be known. You should know what action is. You should know what prohibited actions are, and you should also know what non-action is. The nature of action is impenetrable. So let's talk about the word impenetrable first. In Sanskrit, it's known as ghana. Ghana means dense, deep, impenetrable. I don't know if the word Ghana came from that in Africa a long time ago, but that's exactly how it's spelled in English, Ghana. So the nature of action is deep, impenetrable, not easy to understand. So the Atman is akarma. That means it is inactive, non-action. While it propels you to act, like the sun, with the examples we gave before, it's inactive, but without the sun you cannot act. Action is life. Without action you cannot live. Even a thought is an action. Thinking that I'm not thinking is an action. Yeah. Breathing is an action. Sitting is an action. All of these are actions. You must act throughout your life. And the root of action is one's inherent nature. We talked about prakriti. So you remember we talked about how you have a certain prakriti. You're born with that prakriti. Any parent, any grandparent says, I know that this child versus this child, from early childhood, there was these differences. Right. Where did that come from? A lot of people say to me, I don't believe in reincarnation. Well, how do you explain that certain children have certain abilities, interests, drives, prakriti right from birth? Right. They have this. Mm-hmm. How do you explain that? You can't explain it with a lot of other things, but take it from me that this is their prakriti from their previous lives. That prakriti generates vasanas. It generates vasanas, it generates their gunas, whether they're sattvic, whether they're rajasic, whether they're tamasic, comes from that prakriti. That generates then vasanas. The vasanas generate thoughts. It's a cycle. Mm-hmm. The thoughts desires generate desires. Desires cause you to act. And those actions then, whether they're fulfilled or not fulfilled, generate more desires, which then go back into your prakriti, and it becomes a vicious cycle. This cycle is very important for everybody to remember. Remember, action is a cause. You do something, it causes more vasanas. So action is the cause, vasanas is the effect, but then vasanas become the cause of the action, because you have vasanas, you have an action, and that is the effect. So it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Now, in this verse, he talks about karma, akarma, and vikarma. Karma is action, and there are two kinds of karma that we all have to do. One is nitya karma, and the second is naimitika karma. So nitya karma is something that you have to do on a daily basis. That is your duty. You have to, whatever work you do, that's your nitya karma.
Right.
Once in a while, when you're going to work, you stop, you see your neighbor collapsing, and he's got chest pain. You can't say, well, I'm sorry, I'm late for work, I gotta go. You have to, at that point, stop what you're doing, go and immediately help your neighbor, do whatever it is that came about unexpectedly, and you have to call your boss and say, I'm sorry, my neighbor fell down, he was having a heart attack, I had to rush him to the hospital, I'm sorry I couldn't come to work, or I'm sorry I'm late. That's a naimitika, that's your duty. You have to do for your fellow human being, your neighbor, your family member, etc. And that's the difference in your karma. Vikarma means actions which are harmful to society, harmful to others. Those actions are forbidden. So the difference between the Gita and the Upanishads and certain other books is that they never tell you what is vikarma. They never say to you, don't do this. They're just saying actions that are prohibited. You, with your intellect, with your conscience, decide what is not good karma.
There's no equivalent. Therefore, there's no equivalent of the Ten Commandments to go by.
None.
Yeah.
None. In fact, it goes on to say that this is important. In fact, it goes on to say that certain vikarmas actually are karmas depending on the circumstance.
When Krishna was talking to Arjuna about killing his cousins.
Exactly. So normally, go ahead.
That's an example of that.
That's a very good example of that. So violence is forbidden, right? Violence is forbidden. It's a vikarma because in the Gita, it teaches us about ahimsa, which is no violence unless it's actually needed.
Yep.
So it says no violence. It doesn't say it, but ahimsa is what Mahatma Gandhi practiced, no violence. But like you said, Lou, if it is needed because there's a terrorist that's going to kill a lot of other people, you have to do it. You have to look to either your guru or your own intellect or a higher power. If your intellect is not strong enough, go to somebody with a higher intellect and say, what should I do? This terrorist is killing people. I don't like violence, but should I take him out? Yes, you take him out immediately if you can.
Yeah.
So vikarma is a forbidden action, lying, stealing, adultery, violence. Those kinds of vikarmas can be thought of as karmas depending on the right circumstance. Now, akarma is non-action or inaction, like electricity, petrol, sun. The Atman is inactive but causes other action, karma, because of its presence in it. So that's verse 17. Verse 18 is a very important verse that essentially says that the Atman is also, he who sees inaction in action or action in inaction, he is wise. He's a yogi. He's a doer.
Yes.
So recognize, he says, that there are things about the Atman that basically, as the self-enlightened person gets towards the Atman, thinking, speaking is also an activity, a karma. In karma, there's a sense of doership. I did this. I'm doing this. It is a feeling that I am doing nothing. That's also an action. The sense of doership is there. The Atman, who is not a doer, in which no activity happens, yet action happens through the body, mind, and intellect. So those who recognize this, those who study this, he says, is a yogi. He's a doer. He understands that the Atman, even though the Atman is not doing anything, is causing everything to happen around. So these verses, from verse 11 to verse 18, are the ones that are talking about the relationship between our actions and our Atman. Very important concept to understand, actions and the relationship with the self for us in our journey towards the self or self-development. Many of you have asked, I don't think at the age of whatever age you are, I can use the remaining years in my life to become self-realized. So why am I wasting my time, right? Good question, because even if you're 60 years old, 70 years old, you say, I can't become a Buddha or a Jesus Christ in the remaining years. Why am I wasting my time? Why not just enjoy myself? And you certainly can, because one of the reasons you came to this earth, one of the reasons you took birth is to satisfy your vasanas. So to just stifle them, you'll just get frustrated. You have to put your vasanas, you have to fulfill them, you have to feed them. But by studying this, my friend, you get to the path of self-development, not necessarily self-realization.
Right.
Self-realization may come many lives from now, but I promise you that you will use this for self-development. You will become more developed and you will feel better, not just spiritually, but also materially. I can also tell you that as this happens, your mind becomes more peaceful. As you become more peaceful, you become more focused. As you become more focused, you become more productive. As you become more productive, you become more successful and materially become more higher. So there are benefits in this world. You don't do it for those benefits, I hope. You do it for the spiritual reasons. But in the process of doing that, you will find yourself materially more prosperous. And in some ways, the scriptures say that material prosperity is thrown in front of you as a temptation. Yeah. To prevent you, to see if you will stumble as you become more prosperous, whether you're going to fall or whether you're going to continue on your path to spirituality. So I hope you do, and I wish you the best. Thank you very much. Lou, thank you so much.
We'll see you next time.